too perfectly or anything. Put a few lines in there just to make that look a little more 3D. Let's come up here too and put a roof on this, make this into a tunnel. I think I really should do like a Bob Ross of Dungeons stream sometime. Just like invite people to bring their pen and paper and let's make some dungeons together. Not that I can make any claim to be a master on the level of Bob Ross, but I can draw dungeons. I think I'm gonna do more mushrooms. I like how those turned out. All right, so I got my cheap acrylic paint pens. I don't even know what brand these are. It literally just says acrylic paint pens. Made in China. Mango and Lime Designs Limited. Okay. Okay, I'm going to do another mushroom cave kind of behind. I'm going to do a third one. Why not? Yeah, remember how I did these? That's the tricky part. Start with some red shapes to be our mushrooms. Let's try and get a few different sizes. Put smaller ones to the back, it'll look like the cave goes back there maybe. Okay. Use some white for the stalks. And then some dots. I love crappy, cheap art supplies and products. I love playing around with them and experimenting with them. But for some jobs, you want a good pen, and these Molotow paint pens. It took me a long time to find the sizes and colors that I like, but they are great. I use this white pen practically every day. And for smaller jobs, I use these white gel pens. What brand are these again? Oh, this is a Sakura. Yeah, Sakura gel pens. This one's yellow, actually, but I have a white one. They're pretty good, too. Okay. Now, outline those in black. I think I'll just use my black brush pen. I don't know if all this babbling on about pens is useful to anybody or not, but I hope so. Put a little shadow under each of these to make it look like the cap is really 3D. Another thing I'm liking about these pens is some paint pens, they really repel ink. So once you paint, you can't get ink anywhere near them. But these ones seem to play pretty well with the ink, so I'm pretty happy about that. Sorry for the poor camera quality. I don't know, maybe a couple of Patreon releases away. Right now I have no art supply budget at all and no streaming budget, but maybe as we get into spring I'll have some money, I can buy a better camera. The one I've got it's a great camera for streaming something other than art, unfortunately. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with how that's turning out. And then I'm just going to use a really fine pen for the bottoms. A trick with pen thickness is a thicker line looks 3D, right? If it's something that you could reach behind, a thicker line will give it more definition, and thinner lines for the smaller details. And I guess I'll just make the ground, put these little upside down V's here to make the ground look the same as this room, so it looks like this cavern has a spongy fungal floor. Some dots. Put a little shadow under some of these. Yeah, there we go. I like that. Alright, what next? I really want to do something with this lava cavern, but I'm not sure what to do. Well, maybe I'll think about that. Now I'm gonna give I kind of want the rock to be a little bit more busier. Give it some texture. What is this? Oh, haha. This track on my iPhone is called Climbing Everest Thing by I Don't Know. So I have no idea what this piece of music is. It sounds pretty cool. I must have picked it up somewhere and just not. All right, so I'm just gonna use this gel pen. I'm gonna give all this green rock a pattern, basically. Actually, turns out this is a sparkly gel pen. You probably can't tell on there, but it's got sparkles in it, which I've been actually incorporating sparkly textures into my art more and more. It's just kind of fun. And so with these, I'm just going to make some gentle curving lines, put a little curlicue or a circle in it wherever it feels like it'll fit. Yeah, this track has a cool vibe to it. Make these lines a little thicker, I think. And I like that the green almost fades into the background. Actually, when I put a shadow on it, it seems like you can see better what it looks like. That way, hopefully the texture won't, it'll stand out from the rooms. So the rooms will still look like negative space. And this patterned rock will just look like it's kind of turns into a color. think this must be magical rock. So in terrestrial geology, we have three kinds of rocks. Igneous rock, which comes from molten rock. Sedimentary, which is rocks that are broken down and laid down by glaciers or water and then compressed into stone. And metamorphic, which are rocks that are changed from their original sedimentary or igneous form by heat, pressure, natural forces. But in a dungeon world, might there not be magical metamorphic rock? Rock whose form is dictated by magical forces or even divine forces? Something to think about. We know that in Dungeons and Dragons, magic that can turn things into stone, i.e. flesh, that's a thing. So when a thump, something is turned to stone by magic, what kind of stone is that? How do you classify that, scientifically speaking? iTunes has given us some interesting tracks today. So this is a little obscure trivia for you. The theme song from a documentary about archaeology on the Silk Road from the 80s or 90s. The music is by Kitaro. In the documentary, it was a very historic occasion because a joint Japanese-Chinese expedition explored the Silk Road to investigate civilizations and cities that had once been there. This is was at the time and probably still is a touchy subject because the issue of who various peoples are and where they came from is a very touchy issue in China, Japan, Korea, even today. I mean, not unlike the United States. That is the case here, too. And so it was quite a historic and interesting and somewhat charged occasion. But fascinating documentaries, if you ever get a chance to see them. Woe to the poor goblins who have to slave away in the Paisley mines. I generally like how that's turning out. It's kind of neat. You know, my method here is just to make a shape like this curlicue and then let that shape tell me what the stuff around it should look like. So I just kind of do a variation on it. I remember coloring has sort of become a craze as a way of relaxing and getting out your creativity. Before that, it was Zentangles, which is just kind of a method of doodling. And I know this because I read a bunch about Zentangles when I was writing the first version of How to Host a Dungeon, because writing instructions about how to draw is really hard. So I wanted to see how other people tackled it. Because it's not like, you know, rolling dice and consulting tables, which are very definitive activities. It's tricky to tell people how to draw something. The Silk Road documentary was, I think it was called literally The Silk Road. It's like multiple parts, like an 8-part or something. It's fascinating. I remember one episode in particular in which they were investigating a city in the deserts in, I want to say, northeastern or eastern China. And the ruins had not been very much investigated, and there were, because it's so dry there were graves in which they were finding people's remains that looked like, you know, like they were modern, like they were practically, you know, buried yesterday because they were preserved for so long. And this is a really interesting. This kind of blew my mind a bit. That episode of the documentary ends with, and these vanished people, no one knows where they came from or where they went. And a friend of mine who's a China expert who studied China said, no, actually those people are still there. The people in the town where they went for supplies before they went to the archaeological dig, those are the same people. It's just politically very touchy to admit that. And that is a situation that's still going on. And I say this not being a China expert, not necessarily understanding the complexities of the situation in China, but yeah. People get very worked up with questions of origins and how they relate to the people who live today and where they live and who should live there. Archaeology can be a surprisingly political field of study. Kansas. Yeah, Bjork. I definitely advise checking it out. I really enjoyed it when I watched it. It's pretty fascinating. I definitely went through a phase where I wanted nothing more in the world than to grow up to be an archaeologist. I think that was just after I wanted to grow up to be a geologist. And hey, now I make dungeons. I got both. That's literally the best job in the world. Yeah, I think that looks pretty neat. I think I'm gonna do something similar with some of the other layers. All right, well, this is an experiment, so I'm going to get a little experimental. Let's see. I've got a gold pen somewhere. Yeah. So this set of gel pens that I'm using, that I use for a lot of my gel pen stuff, this is a super cheap 100 gel pen set. I think it cost me 20 bucks, like every color you could possibly want. However, their metallics are not so great, so I have this Uniball metallic that I use for a lot of my gold. And gold and blue is a great combo. This may be too contrasty. I may be making a mistake here, but this is an experiment drawing, so I'm going to make this level a blue and gold geometric pattern. If only I had known when I was a teenager that being a professional dungeon maker was a possibility. I think it's amazing that there are now people in the world who literally dungeon master for a living. That is the best thing ever. I am in awe. But I get to spend a lot of time drawing dungeons and designing dungeon games, so I mean, I am just the luckiest in that regard. Get a different angle on this. It's starting to look like a maze. Alright, so my new headcanon is that the reason why minotaurs and mazes are associated is because in a fantasy world, there are certain minerals whose crystalline structures, like this one that I'm drawing here, are maze-like. And so they form natural mazes which can easily be expanded and repurposed into true labyrinths. Boy, I really need to write a book about fantasy geology sometime. Make sure you can see what I'm doing. One thing I like about the kind of the intersection between fine art and game art is the fine art world, which I have been known to criticize from time to time. One thing it's got going on is for someone to do something, if someone is an artist, for them to go into their studio and do something, mix certain materials together to try and get a particular effect that they have in their head or they're curious about, they don't really need any excuse for that. The fact that an artist wants to try it is reason enough for it to be art. And this does give rise to lots of pieces of art that make people say, someone did that, I could have done that. That's, which can be fair criticism. But that spirit of experimentation, of not having to draw your maps on the grid or follow any set of rules, I really love. And so, for me, making dungeon maps is as a practical role in gaming, and is also just it's fine art. It's an art activity, and that leaves me free to just goof off and try whatever I want, like this, which you can't even see what I'm doing. Apologies for that. Now, one other thing that the fine art world, a perception it creates that I do not like, is that artists are strange, magical, otherworldly flowers who create these magical things that no normal person could care to create. I think everybody who has any desire to should be able to go into a studio or a set-aside corner of their house or their kitchen table and make whatever crazy thing their imagination is telling them they should try and make, and not worry about whether it's any good or anybody else cares about it, or anything like that. So, which I guess is part of the reason why I made Host a Dungeon, really. All right, let's zoom out a little bit and decide what we're gonna tackle next. You know what? I think I'm going to take a 5-minute break. I'm going to grab a piece of toast for my rumbling tummy, and then I'm going to come right back. So, I will not be gone long. So, talks amongst yourselves while I'm gone. right. I am back with some espresso to keep me going or get me going. I guess you can't really say keep me going at 10 or 11 in the morning. So this is to help get me going. All right, so I kind of like the results I've gotten so far with this patterning in these dungeon layers. So I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna actually push my luck a little. Normally at this point I might kind of step back a little, but this is an experiment, so I'm gonna make a polka dot level, and I'm choosing this kind of frosty purple gel pen. Ooh, whoa, okay, so that's way darker than I thought. I should have tested that first. I don't want it that dark. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to smudge that out. And I'm going to draw a rim around it, like so. And I'm just going to make it into a room with a weird purple thing in it. Okay. So I want a purple color that's not too different from this shade of purple. So let's just try a few. Okay, that's like a really peachy pink. That's pretty dark. It's also really dark, boy. Too pink. Am I going to find the color I need here? That is the question. That's almost reddish. Let's try this one. Ooh, that's a nice sparkly one. Not for this, but maybe for something else. Man, I'm really sorry the camera quality is so bad. It seems like it's worse today than usual. Like, can I get... If I put a little more light on it? Doesn't seem to do much. Alright, I can't seem to do much about it. Maybe, let's try, instead of a gel pen, okay, that's really dark. I've got a Sakura pen. That's the color I want. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna turn this track up because I like it a lot. Hope that's not too loud. So this is an LA-based street artist and DJ named Tewz, T-E-W-Z. This track is called Ancient Astronauts? Ancient Astronauts. It's kind of trippy and weird. Tewz was a competitor on the fine art reality TV show Work of Art Season 2. Not a particularly successful competitor, unfortunately. He just didn't really have the reality TV vibe or something. Work of Art was a show. I like reality TV, some of it. I really enjoyed Work of Art. I watched it with my daughter, who was like 10, 12 at the time. Who is she is an amazing artist. She's better than me by a long shot. If she gives me permission, I'll share the link to her webcomic about demons in high school. But I won't do it unless she says I can, because she's shy sometimes. Anyway, we watched that together and we talked a lot about art. We really enjoyed that show. And I have been a fan of Tuz's music ever since. Also, on that show, as a competitor, was an artist named, who calls himself the Suck Lord, who makes cheap bootleg action figures. This is one of his Gay Empire action figures that I was really lucky to find thanks to my friend Eric, who runs Gamma Ray Games in Seattle. And I have another one of his action figures too, which is a superhero inspired by chow mein noodles. I don't, that's weird and goofy, and I just thought it was cool. Suck Lord has a Patreon, but this is the last month you can support it because he's shutting it down, at least temporarily, unfortunately, which bummed me out. But yeah. Oh, and I've got to show you this. It's the Suck Lord. His Star Wars is one of his inspirations. His persona is kind of this supervillain, like Boba Fett masked dude. I got this for supporting his Patreon, and he put a nice note on the back. Tony, thanks for the money. It just tickles me. So, this episode of the Bob Ross of Dungeons brought to you by the Super Suck Lord and reality television. Yeah, this dot pattern is way too bold. That's okay. This is a test. I don't know if you can tell, but the gel pen, the ink is really heavy, and so it's soaking into the page and then leaving a dark dot in the middle because the ink is kind of pooling in the middle after it soaks into the page. That looks pretty cool. I think it's because of the pink ink underneath is keeping the page from fully absorbing the gel ink. Those are the kind of fun things you discover sometimes when you're experimenting with different materials. I don't think purple polka dots are ever going to replace the famous Dyson Logos crosshatch. I'm not sure what kind of geological formation purple polka dots represents in a fantasy world. Sometimes in the real world you will find stones that are little round river pebbles embedded in another substance. So where little pebbles fell into mud and the mud formed into rock, it's called a conglomerate. So I don't know, maybe this is a fantastical conglomerate. I'm sorry, my furnace just turned on. I'm going to go turn that off because that is going to mess up the audio. All right, back in 2. Alright, that should turn itself off in about a minute and a half. Let's turn this sideways. Yeah, the dots are actually drying really light. That's cool. Actually, it's the perfect, turns out it's the perfect shade. Put some dots along this river here. I don't know if you can see, but we've got this river. We've got this dude with a fishing pole and a little hut, and some other dudes with spears. Maybe going to hunt the dragon up here. There's a little house along the river, bridge. Got some river folk happening in my dungeon. Not really feeling like adding a lot of details today. I just kind of want to add texture and color, and that's just all I have the mental energy for today. Which is fine. Sometimes you just chill and daydream. This is probably an appropriate time for me to make a plug for my Patreon. So, if you like my art, or if you're interested in my game, How to Host a Dungeon, consider supporting me on Patreon, or just visiting my Patreon page and seeing what's there at patreon.com/Tony Dowler, TonyDowler. Patrons on Patreon get early access to all How to Host a Dungeon content, exclusive artwork, non-exclusive artwork, occasional gifts and postcards in the mail, adventures and game supplements from time to time. It's really just an all-around awesome deal. And if you don't want to support me on Patreon, or can't support me on Patreon, follow me anyway and you can see what I'm up to. Just about everything I make gets released for free as well. And, oh, I smudged my dots. You see? Bad artist. Bad artist. I should have turned the page so I wouldn't smudge it. What else was I going to say? Or follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and you'll get updates on what I'm doing. That's it. That's my full plug. Now go. Tell your friends to support me on Patreon. No, that's okay. You don't have to support me on Patreon. Just hang out and do art. Okay, let's see. What's next? I got this kind of yellow zone down here. I drew some crystals in yellow gel pen, but they don't show. They're practically invisible. So, sorry, I'm just looking around for some color inspiration. I wonder if I have some like yellow-green, like maybe this, see what this color looks like. It's like a green apple shade. Shoot, my dots! I keep smudging my dots! Damn it. I am a messy artist. I'm a little careless. That's, if I were, other than my lack of knowledge of professional techniques, I think my carelessness is my biggest handicap as an artist. I wonder what would happen if I took yellow highlighter on that paint. I have no idea. I think I'll give it a try. Keeping in my theme of talking about pens and cool pens, this is a Wexford liquid ink highlighter that I spotted at Bartell. As pens go, it has some notable weaknesses. The first one is the ink reservoir is tiny. And second, this tip has a tendency to pop out when you take the cap off. Its advantages are, so it's got a liquid ink reservoir, and the ink comes out really liquid. Like you can paint with it basically if you want to. It leaves a really strong highlight. I love these pens. I use them a lot. I'm gonna see. Let's just try a little spot. Is that visible on screen? Can't see much. It actually has kind of a neat effect. Let's do a little more. Yeah, I'm going to kind of use this to tone this. So I'm going to kind of highlight underneath this underground river here, and I'm going to smudge it with my finger. It's not showing terribly much on camera, but I won't spend a ton of time on this. Another effect I like with these liquid ink highlighters, a little trick. So in a spot like this, you can see I've painted very roughly, and there's places where the white paper shows through. The highlighter, I'm betting, will come out really yellow on those spots, and it kind of creates a neat effect. So I'm just going to kind of smudge and increase the layering effect on this level of the underground. Yeah, I like what that's doing. Sometimes I don't know if this is a dungeon show or a drawing show. I guess it doesn't matter. Oh, this is more twos. This is Ghost Dance. The album is called Helix. And if you dig these kind of funky beats, I recommend you check it out. Also, I'm pretty sure Twos is not going to come down on me with a cease and desist letter for playing his music on stream. Alright. Take a little white now and just kind of give some of these rooms a little outline, make them stand out a little more as being spaces. So now I'm looking at this. What other things there are to do? So I've got this cave here outside this strange city. I haven't decided what I'm going to do with this. I kind of want to make it feel like a fantastic underground. I got this kind of forest up here. Oh, and another thing. When I taped this down, I tore the page here, taking the tape off. I was not careful enough. So that kind of disqualifies this ever being an art gallery piece. It's I'm going to do something up here, up at top by this city. I think Maybe I'll texture this in. I'm toying with the idea of doing just cross-hatching. I don't know. Anyone on stream have any ideas? This is an interesting color. I don't think I've ever... Oh, that's like a bronze metallic. Wow, okay. Let's see what this one is. That's a darker version of the same. What's this? Sorry, but U2 is auto skip. Not that I don't like U2, it's just I never asked for that album and iTunes keeps downloading it onto my device, so I'm not cool with that. Let's go with this. This is like a clear metallic orange. Interesting. Kind of give this a fractured texture. I think Twitch needs to make dungeon maps a tag. We need more people drawing dungeon maps on Twitch. Retweet if you agree. Yeah, I guess I'm okay with how this is going. Thank you, Bjork. Thank you for the retweet. We have just invented the Twitch retweet. I am not super hip in the music world, but I have a teenage daughter, which means I do occasionally get exposed to cool new music. Like this Janelle Monáe, which is pretty hip. Actually, my daughter didn't introduce me to this. This was someone in my D&D group that was raving about Janelle Monáe, and I had to check it out. But my daughter is a big fan. Here, let's turn this map upside right again. Yeah, that gives it some texture. Let's. I'm going to come back down to this bottom. Actually, here's a thought. Let's. I have a few gel pen colors that I keep for. They get a heavy use, like this beige, which I'm going to put it in here where the ink has not covered the paper, so that I'm just going to kind of fill that in. I think it'll just make this look a little fuller. I mean, it sort of really blends with the background, but I think it makes this section look a little more, I don't know, richer, more complete. Yeah, that adds a little color texture that I like. Let's keep it going around the city. Go upside down again. True story. When I was in college, my sophomore class went to Rome for a semester. Basically, I was able to pay tuition. I was able to get to Rome, and I had no money after that. And so I drew Michelangelo pictures, copied Michelangelo pictures on the sidewalk in chalk for change. I wasn't particularly good at it, but I made enough money to get food and beer, which is all I wanted at the time. But that was where I learned how to draw upside down, because when you do that, the art has to face the people walking by, not you. And so I got a lot of practice drawing upside down. I still want to do something with this bottom realm. Maybe, how does this... Actually, I'm going to keep using this tan gel pen, and I'm just going to kind of... Yeah, this doesn't work so great on this ink. I'm not going to continue with that. A poultry and Mona Lisa was a man. I don't know. I feel like I'm just making a mess. Everything I try, I'm just not super happy with. They don't tell you how much of art is sitting around waiting for ideas. Okay. I'm not going to work on that. I'm going to do a little detail work now. Let's see if I can make this worth looking at for you all. So this is supposed to be a door to the dwarven city. And I'm just going to kind of I'm going to add some definition to it. I'm going a little abstract here. I'm not trying to make this realistic at all, as that's not where my brain is today. more. I'm just trying to add these big thick lines. I'm trying to add some smaller lines that just give a different level of detail. Make some visual interest. That was me just. That was me putting my elbow in a palette of wet acrylic ink. That was just about a disaster. So, advice to anybody watching this: do a better job of not leaving stuff sitting all over your table while you're working. I'm really bad for that. So keep watching the stream for my inevitable massive paint spill disaster. It will happen someday. But not today. Alright. I also have this kind of dwarven citadel here. Maybe I can make this look a little more spiky and imposing by adding some black highlights around the features here. It's actually kind of helpful looking at my art on the screen while I'm drawing it because it gives me a little bit of a different perspective. I can kind of see it the way you all are seeing it, which helps me see places where I could be doing something interesting. Yeah, this is starting to look a little more sinister. So I guess this, right, the dwarves, they have this big gate to their underground city. But they've also got this like citadel that sticks up above the ground. I don't know what this, like, maybe it's like a fortress that doesn't have any doors on the surface. I mean, I've done that in Dwarf Fortress. I've built a fortress where there are fortifications that have no entrance on the surface. So I guess that's what's going on here.